I'm extremely glad once again to be able to welcome you back. So this is our last morning on CADALFEST festival, this 5-day festival that has been hosted by Adishakti. And so this is going to be our last panel discussion. It is going to be chaired and moderated by Dickens, Leonard and Manju, Edachira. And they will introduce the members of the panel, the participants on the panel. I would simply like to say that they both teach at IIT Delhi. They are scholars in cultural studies and anti-caste thought, thinking, and have been publishing important work and articles, generally in the press, and in collected editions. One of those collected editions, you have already heard about it. It's the Routledge Companion on caste and cinema that was just released by Routledge, so in November, and that I co-edited with Joshil Abraham. So they have an important article, an important chapter, in fact, in the book. And another member of the panel, Jyoti Nisha, also has a very important chapter in the book. So the South Asian edition has not been released yet, so the price for the global edition is just outrageously expensive. You just wait for the South Asian edition, or you go to LibGen. So I would like to welcome Lenny, shall I call you Lenny, as I do generally, and Manju. So please come. And please say a few words about the way you want to organize the panel and what you're going to start with and how the discussion is going to unfold.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith, for this wonderful opportunity and for having us. And really excited, Nicole, Adishakti, and all the participants, friends, who we had the opportunity to meet over the last 5 days. This is the last session, and as per the plan, we are trying to keep it a little informal. This session we have kind of two kinds of sessions. There's an important thing. There's a pre-release of a trailer by Jyoti Nisha, which will be happening soon, and we'll have a conversation, discussion, and open questions about the documentary that she has been doing for the last 8 years. And the second session is on theatre and performance. That's a plan. So what we have planned is, this session is called Refounding Dalit Aesthetics. Now, Dalit aesthetic itself had a very long, interesting history in our subcontinent, and with translation studies, with literature, with social movements. So that's a larger theme, but one of the perspectives we are planning to foreground in this session is this idea, which is a Tamil word with the translation there, Magizhchi. Without any further explanation on this and the theme in which we want to kind of thrust this session into, we just want to introduce you with this short song. This is by the Jangama Collective. The founder member and the performer director, now a popular music director, was here a couple of days back. He was supposed to join us in this session, but unfortunately he's not with us. But we thought this is a word that was kind of made mobilized by this movement, which has a certain kind of a reverberation today across the subcontinent. And we thought this music album that this group did, the Jangama Collective group, many people know it, otherwise you just Google it. But we thought we'd start off with this song, with this performance they made. But this song is part of the album called Magizhchi, which the Jangama Collective released in the year 2019. It's very interesting because the song is directed by Ranjit. That's the only song that he directed for the group. And it's a collective that was from the Castes Collective. The term itself was inspired from the 19th century, early 20th century anti-caste Tamil intellectual Ayodhya Pandita. He called the Buddhism that he imagined as Jati Vedamatra, which is casteless Buddhism and casteless Tamil. So they got inspired, and there's a music troupe which is titled after them. We'll start with that and then over to Manju.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to thank Judith and Nicole for inviting us. So, and also for this 5 days of performance and discussions, and so we are very happy to also discuss on Magizhchi, and also we are looking forward to Jyoti's and Lakshman's and Mohit's the discussions which we are going to have. So yeah, I will maybe after showing this Magizhchi song, we can have maybe like 2-3 minutes of discussion on this, and then we can go to Jyoti's trailer, which is exclusively it's going to be shown only to you. It's not released yet. So yeah, that's one of the highlights of this session. So yeah, let's watch Magizhchi. Can we have the lights on, please?
மனதை கொடு கவலை மறந்து விடு மனித மனுக்குள்ள போகிற பையனை கொண்டு போவ நீயும் 10 கோடி கொடுத்தாலும் மாட்டி தான போவ இருக்கும் வரைக்கும் சிரித்து பழகு சில பல குறைகள் இருக்கும் அதையும் மறந்து மனிதனை வாழத் தொடங்கினால் மகிழ்ச்சிடா மன்னித்து விட்டாலே மகிழ்ச்சிடா அன்புக்கு மறுபெயர் மகிழ்ச்சிடா உன் வாழ்க்கையில் அவசியம் மகிழ்ச்சிடா கடந்து வா கடந்த காலத்தை மறந்து வா நடந்த துயரத்தை இனி இன்பம் ப்ரோ அது மகிழ்ச்சிடா அட இன்பத்தின் முகவரி மகிழ்ச்சிடா
And make you gang up. Nella nama kayilla lo vediko waiting. Isadale peso what a way to watch it. Kayabilla yurabaya poradu rupapa mupata talamurayaga. Namakata da yenikame flash to suka the rebelama valoranga. Nilla roto sili badi badi yaga bella vande daga dani corredi parri. Bella ka potti adikada paakara vodiki vechi yaga balla tata kudra. Magizhchi naga buddi varu parri. Magizhchi
you must have also seen some of the subtitles in this. So the term Magizhchi, Tamil term Magizhchi, which means happiness, joy, excessive glee. So this is something, the term, it's been made popular, it's been there in the Tamil parlance, but then it's been made popular by filmmaker Paranjit, and especially through his film, one is Kabali, and also through the Castless Collective, this album called Magizhchi. So it is something which through the song, which one could also see it as an affect, which prompts one to move beyond the oppressed past towards an emancipatory future. And so this is it's one of the way to imagine Dalit subjectivities beyond pain and sufferings and towards the limitless possibilities, and kind of an aesthetics where one is beyond the one moves beyond the past oppressions towards this colorful life. Also, I mean, as you might have seen, the song is filled with colors, and the music is also fusion. Like you could hear different kinds of music in that. So in a way, there is something to move beyond this pain and humiliation towards this possibilities, or a kind of an aesthetics of becoming, where one is always in the process of becoming instead of just being stuck in that moment. So. Yeah. So. It also brings towards these questions of union beyond differences, and where one is not slave to anyone, and as I mentioned before, the questions on limitless possibilities and the aesthetics of becoming. So with that, we would also you can actually expect some of the discussions based on this ideas on aesthetics, which we are going to listen from the practitioners here. As Leonard mentioned, first session we would have largely on film, and the second session we would have it on theatre. So yeah, we will have so before going to the other screening, I thought I'll just I'll introduce. First session, which we have here, Jyoti with us. So I'll introduce Jyoti. So Jyoti Nisha is a Mumbai-based academic, writer, screenwriter, and filmmaker with a focus on cinema, gaze, caste, gender, and media. And she has 10 years of experience in print, radio, and TV. She also worked as a director's assistant to Neeraj Kewan for her short film Gili Kuchi, which some of you might have seen, which was a part of this Netflix anthology called Ajib Dastan. And so yeah, Nisha also directed, produced, and crowdfunded her upcoming feature-length documentary film titled Dr. Ambedkar Now and Then, in collaboration with Paranjit's Neelam Productions. So which we will be seeing the trailer. It's a preview. So we will be seeing that in a while. And she currently works as a producing faculty at the Whistling Woods International. Jyoti has written for Aljazeera, EPW, and many other, like Times of India, the Indian Express, many other platforms. So yeah, before calling Jyoti for the discussion, I think we can just go for the screening of her pre-release of the trailer. Yeah. So yeah, we are very happy to see the trailer, and something which kind of opens up a lot of debates and discussions which came in the recent times, especially in the post-2010s, I would think, or like, yeah, around 2014-15 exactly, if we put it. So it's very, for many of us, we could actually recollect a lot of moments which we just saw in your film. So yeah, and to begin with, we are quite familiar with your work on Bahujan spectatorship, which was published in EPW, and we know you largely as a writer who has kind of worked on the idea of Bahujan spectatorship, and we would like to know more as your experience as a filmmaker or screenwriter. So just maybe like taking from the idea on gaze, or which we kind of know as amongst other scholars, there are many works on other on gaze. So I was just thinking maybe we can start off the discussion on, because this was also documentation, and maybe like we could start the discussion on your while making or your idea on documentation and the gaze, something which you want to reflect on. Yeah.
So the idea of gaze, basically, I was just, when I was not even in academia, or I went to film school, and there was no mention of caste, or the gaze was very much like popular per se. So this, I was just kind of unhappy with the way the marginalized in this country and the women were kind of represented. And I think that came also from the perspective that, I come from North, and there was some kind of a history of anti-caste movement in the family. So we've been very assertive about our social identity. There was no shame or nothing like that. It was like self-respect, assertion, pride, that kind of a thing. So I could really not relate with why the marginalized were represented in, derogatory manner, poor, dirty, or like they don't have an agency, sort of a thing. So for me, it was the experience. That experience was not affirmative. It was not validating. It wasn't, it wasn't validating. It was disrespectful in some sense. And I was, as an intellectual, I was kind of thinking, and I think it's also so much related with intention, and also so much related with ethics as well. So I was just like, oh, okay, this knowledge already exists. It's not Jyoti Nisha is saying it for the first time. Baba Sahib has written about it. Phule has written about it. Pega has written about it. So many people have written about it. But what is stopping people to not, represent the marginalized in a respectful gaze? So for me, the film was also that. I'll tell you what is the history of film. I've been working on this film for the last 8 years. And so when I started documenting the film, I didn't have this gaze, which you see in the film, or in the trailer actually. The idea of gaze, that you see that pair of eyes, which is mine. So for me, that it had to be like somehow conveyed cinematically on the screen, and I didn't have that perspective, like you saw on the trailer as well. I developed this gaze because I was also educating myself about the culture, the politics, all of that, and so I documented, so much, with Rohit Pamela's story, Una, the Me Too, the gaze in cinema, and I was also telling the story from a popular perspective. So for me, that gaze shifted, and that was very interesting. And that only came when I went to TISS. And so while I was working on the film for a couple of years, like 3 years, and then I was realizing, okay, like the subject is too intense. If I don't tell it properly, perhaps I'll hear a lot from the people, and I'll be like, my career will go down just like that before it even takes off. So I went to TISS to study, I did my MA in Media and Culture Studies, where I studied about caste and gender. And of course I read scholars like Bell Hooks and Sandra Harding and Althusser and Baba Sahib and other thinkers as well. So, and because I come from screenwriting, I've studied screenwriting from FTI Pune, so obviously they taught me popular gaze, and when I came to TIS, I was like, okay, this is not my gaze. I have found an articulation which is there, which was not there before, and and incidentally, I also get into a little anecdote where in 2019 I was called to moderate a session with News Laundry, which was called as the Politics of Cinema, and where Anubhav Sinha was the guest, and Vinod Kapri and Shubhra Gupta. She's a film critic for Indian Express, and there's also a filmmaker, I'm getting her name, but she's very well known. She's written Monsoon Wedding and Kamine, Vishal Bhardwaj's Camp. And I asked the question of, like, what was your research? Like, was the politics was intact while you started making the film, like the Article 15? Because by then I had already shot a lot. I had gone to all these places. I had gone to Una, I had gone to, Gujarat. And so, and I was very curious, like very, very honestly, just very, very curious that what was your point of research? And obviously the answer were not like very satisfying. They were very, it seemed like, there's some kind of a, there is a discourse on caste which has come into popular discourse, so they have made a film on that. So,
because I thought that was a very interesting, point of intervention you thought, because your entry into film school, reading, and then political, interventions into the practitioners of cinema, where you then thought there is a lack, and therefore you. So I thought coming back to the film, I thought it's a very fantastic cut. I thought, but I'm quite interested in the title, because Dr. B.R. Ambedkar is the title, and particularly interested about your subtitle, Then and Now. So there are two questions here. I thought I'll raise you, and probably you can tell a cinematic answer, because you're not absolutely writing a novel, and surely not a historical piece, right? So you're treating it in cinema. So I was thinking, then and now can mean here and now and then, or no, it's actually now and then. Sorry, now and then can mean at once. In one sense, it's what is it now vis-a-vis then, right? In the past, but it's also now and then. It's rare. Rare, as a phrase. Now and then comes and goes. So would you want to tell about that, title and its implication for cinematic practice? Sure. Right, now and then, and historical dimension of now versus then, or now and then. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, let me complete the previous point I was talking about. So that's how, so I wrote on, and because I'm a screenwriter, I'm connected to the industry, the screenwriters, etc. So there were groups, and they started really hounding me and sending me these voice messages and text messages that why you're asking them to tell, a story in a certain sense, and adhere to a certain kind of a gaze or perspective. So then I thought, okay, I'm not going to write about Anubhav Sinha per se, I thought like you said, there was clearly a lack between which I saw, and something clearly which I also learned at that moment, and I really do not have the capacity to ask, to individually, answer those questions. So I thought academia is the best way. So that's why I write Indian cinema and Bahujan spectatorship, which is an oppositional gaze, which kind of opposes the marginalized, the Brahminical representation of marginalized and popular perspective in cinema. Coming to the question of now and then, for me the journey started from now. 2014, BJP came into power, so much change, and the attack on institutions started happening. And by then, I graduated from film school in 2009-10, so by 2014, I also had some grasp on my craft. I'd also written some kind of stories, and I was like, okay, a government is going to tell me not to tell a story the way I want to tell. So I was not very happy with that. So the now, when I was working on the film, I clearly saw that there was a symbolical resonance which was there in what was happening in the now and what already had happened in the then, the kind of movements that Baba Saheb had led. So what Chandrasekhar Azad was doing with Bhim Army, or Jinesh Mamani was doing with Dalit Asmita Yatra. Tenma Soundarajan was talking about, she did what she did with the hate speech and all of that, and Raya Sarkar's Losha as well. So I was very interested that suddenly after 2014, everybody's saying Jai Bhim. Everybody wants to kind of appropriate Baba Saheb. Everybody's talking about Ambedkar. And I'm like, why? Why are you talking about it? Why are you interested in it? And then you kind of realize that the population of this country, which is the marginalized of this country, is 85%. And yeah, you're the vote bank. So clearly, it seemed like there is a political reason behind it. And the way the movements were led basically were like, I saw the resonance, like I said, with Mahar Satyagya or Temple Entry, or the kind of newspapers that Baba Saheb had started, and the kind of conversations that were happening today as well. So I just felt there was a resonance, and for me, at the moment started, for me the awakening was in the now. So it's now and then.
Yeah, thanks Jyoti for that. Just to add on from you as an addition to what you have just mentioned. So this kind of comes across as an oppositional gaze, as you have rightly mentioned. So I was just thinking the assertion, the aspect of assertion, or the power of presence, that you are making a film and you want to articulate certain things which were not there, and in the current political scenario. And so maybe you could talk a little bit on what that aspect of assertion, or the power and strength which you want to show through this particular documentary on Baba Saheb.
Thank you for that question, Manju. I have never felt in my life that we are marginalized. So it was, I don't know, I think that was the kind of upbringing that I had, or I come from North, where, Zahir Khan Sham has led the movement, and he devised this identity of Bahujans and the political identity. So it was also the idea of bringing together all the community, and also truly, everybody wants to annihilate caste, and how will you annihilate caste unless all of us do not come together? And because there is obviously caste and subcaste. So for me, the story, I think our people have immense amount of resilience, and they are intellectuals and kind to what capacity that the press community, the kind of kindness and knowledge and building, that the marginalized of this community have. I've never seen them in a way that, and that was like, that's why the oppositional gaze also was there, because I was like, no, I don't agree with you, sort of that. So it came from the position of strength. It comes from the position of power. It comes from also, there is all you see so many people are speaking, and it is also about occupying that space. It is also about empowering. So for me, it wasn't just about I am going and documenting people. Yes, I was doing that initially, but over a period of years, I realized that you're just a medium. And also, I was very, very conscious, because it's a question of representation. And I had to tell the story in the way, like, I did not understand caste, for sure, really. That's how like popular culture does. They have hijacked our stories and culture, sort of that, and it's not that, and I'm not saying that it's not existed, it's always been there, but the space that they have occupied, I wanted to occupy that space myself, and I wanted to give the space to people by the medium of documentation. So yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Jyoti, for the statement on I did not understand. Because I thought I'll this is the last question. I think we'll open up then. So you are as a director, filmmaker, you're engaging with this instrument called camera, the cinematic apparatus, uh, which is which has a very interesting technological. Check. I think the speaker is gone. You have to speak loud.
Yeah.
So the technological aspect of it, but you very clearly from your articulation, Jyoti has written a brilliant piece on Nachatra Nagargirathu as the position of the Ambedkarite woman. So from your writings, from your speeches, there is a very clear Ambedkarite position that you foreground. Now, my question is, what is an Ambedkarite engagement with cinema? Right, and especially with the form called documentary, right, and the work that you're doing, and especially when you're stating you understand cinema, you're an Ambedkarite. How do you engage with this apparatus called cinematic practice on the camera, which is not a pen?
Yeah. Okay. That is a theorization I have done for Routledge, which is my next.
As a practice.
Yeah, as a practice, and I'm going to get into that, explain that. Earlier, the oppositional Bahujan gaze and spectatorship was about how we are consuming it and what is our experience of consuming the cinema or arts or literature. And it's after a while, I think, not for me, but obviously there are so many filmmakers, Ranjit, Nagraj, Neeraj Gavan, Mari, Jenny Dolly, Rajesh Rajamani, so many people are there. So I also saw that there was a practice. So there was an agency, a different kind of articulation was happening, which was not part of the popular culture. And how it became different for me was this, because they were grounding, they were setting their story in their milieu, in their culture, and it was represented, perhaps, I'm not very sure of that, from the people from the marginalized community. That means perhaps they were part of the crew, they were part of the research, they were part of the writing. And so, as a cinematic practice also, I think so, that when you create, like, we can only have a conversation when we have a piece of work that you can see and talk about. Unless, otherwise, you cannot talk about it. So, and
with this shorter group of people, can you say there's an aesthetic that is?
Yeah, so, I mean, aesthetic is that you are basically like you are setting your stories in your own milieu, in your own culture, in your own symbology, in your own semiotics. There's a completely semiotic connection to that. There are colors, there is color palette, there is language, there is, I mean, mise en scène, everything which is in front of the camera, which is whether the production design, which is the costume, which is the prop, which is the story, everything, all of that is coming from, because that's what I mean. You mentioned Nachitra, like you look at it, like look at Rene or the whole film or this whole conversation. Everything that is happening in front of the camera is political. It is set in the ideology. It is set in those conversations. So that was there. So and I see like the oppositional Bahujan agency is this, that when you create this kind of when you draw from these aesthetics and symbology and literature and this gaze and all of that, you also create a space of literacy. In popular culture, you also create a space for transgression. So anybody for that, like I as a theorist try to, it's also about, as a feminist, as a theorist, also about what were the scientific methods of popular culture. I don't agree with those scientific methods, so I thought I need to create the fucking structure of, the frameworks of those scientific knowledge. So this oppositional Bahujan agency is about that you have that framework within which you have what are the factors that you can perhaps engage with that. It's the story, it's the gaze, it's the ideology, it is the funding, it's the distribution, it is also asking for kind of a reparation also from people. So there's so many that these are famous, and if you kind of apply it, I think you'll be able to, anybody will be able to sort of produce a kind of, so, I mean, in the sense, like, we've also talked about who should tell the story of caste. I think everybody can tell the story of caste, perhaps that you have the right epistemology, So for me, I don't agree with the aesthetic of Natyashastras is not my aesthetic, because obviously, right? So for me, the epistemology had to change. And what is that epistemology? Is to draw your story telling from a non-Brahminical experience, which was Ambedkarite method for me, which is everything that he has produced. So yeah, I mean, as a cinematic medium, I hope I have answered that question, because it can be like.
Jyoti. I think this will open up a very interesting dimension. So if there are any pressing questions, probably for the next 5 minutes, we can come back again.
Yeah.
The audience, any pressing questions, please ask, because I was asked that please open up. I know we want to talk to the filmmakers. So any pressing questions, please. We'll come back again with all the perform. There's two more to go to discuss on the performance session. Anything on film to Jyoti, the wonderful trailer that she showed, and to the engagement that you had. Manju will moderate. Yeah. Any questions?
I think it's good.
Or we'll come back later with others?
Yeah, I think we can
Yeah,
take
we
the
can.
questions later.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jyoti, all the very best for the film, and we'll come back for the question session.
Yeah.
Please. Thank you. Thanks a lot. So the next on board is a session on theatre and performance. Jyoti's film, when would it be released, Jyoti?
I think 2023 sometime.
Next year, 2023. Okay. That's it. Okay. So the next one is the performers were here. Two of them, they had performed day before on the first day in CADALFEST, and they have been around in Pondicherry the last 3-4 days. So in the spirit of the Magizhchi perspective, but also the long question of Dalit, is there a Dalit aesthetic? What is refounding Dalit aesthetics, and how does it relate with the discussions that have been wonderful discussions that we've been having for the last 4 or 5 days with popular culture, literature, thought, translation, and we have these two very interesting dynamic performers. I would like to welcome. I'm really liking Ravana. We just had a very short discussion yesterday. I would like to introduce Lakshmana KP to all of us. Lakshmana, please come. Yeah, hi. So Lakshmana is an actor, director, poet, and also a performance educator. Again, a pedagogue, right? From Karnataka, India. He's at present in Bangalore, and he has a kind of an international experience in training in theatre. So he graduated from the Intercultural Theatre Institute in Singapore, 2018, and also from Ninasam Theatre Institute, which is in Karnataka, Mangalore, which is Shimoga, and which is a very popular institute in South India. And this was in 2012, but his graduation was in 2018 in Singapore, right? After which he has been exploring questions around Dalit aesthetics, which was originally opened up as a question within literature, but he is very much interested in, or rather exploring and experimenting in performance. And his two recent plays, a very young actor as you'd see, two recent plays, We the People of India, and that which was performed here in Pondicherry in this very stage, Daklakada Devi Kavya. Daklakada Devi Kavya. They explored intersecting questions about Dalit political modernity and cultural memory. We have also one more conversationist with us who was part of the team but is actually a researcher, but he asked me not to do that. So Mohit Kaycee, please Mohit. Yeah. Mohit is with us, and Mohit is underground PhD scholar at the University of Columbia, where apparently Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar also did his PhD in anthropology. But Mohit is doing on religion, right? The Department of Religion. So how was he related with this whole thing? He worked at the India Foundation for Arts and the National Law School, but since 2012, ever since Mohit went out of Ninasam, he's been associated and closely associated with him, and with Kottingalli Ramaya, another very popular Dalit intellectual and theatre writer, and his work on pedagogy and performance with Dalit communities in the Kolar region in Karnataka. He's also worked on documenting ritual cultures, oral performative practices, and textual collections of marginal communities across Karnataka. So they've been collaborating, and he is researching as well as is part of the work that Lakshman is doing. So let me just start off, with a short question, which is not actually a question, but probably a kind of a, so because Dalit aesthetics was a largely literary movement, and theatre has a very long history in Karnataka. So Mohit probably or Lakshman probably, you can tell us why the history of theatre and the question of caste that you as performers and theatre writers, screenwriters, practitioners are interested. And interestingly for us, we want to know what is his relationship with Dalit movement, right? So would you want to tell us something more on it as a kind of an intro?
So you introduced me as a performer, but I'm more of a backstage kind of person. And so maybe I can just lay the backdrop in a sense for the main act, which is obviously Lakshman, with the substance about what does it mean to create in that particular context comes about. So my journey with this really started in 2012. I was working at India Foundation for the Arts, where I had a chance to go across the country and see what was happening in every corner in theatre and visual arts and curation and visual arts. But at that point, Kottingalli Ramaya, who is one of the founder members of the Dalit Sanghar Samiti in Karnataka, which is really the main movement that began in the 70s, both as a literary as well as a political movement. He was invited to IFA to talk about something very unusual in some sense. He was invited to the Arts Education Conference, where he talked about pedagogy and performance and working as a children's playwright. And at that point, I kind of like got interested in the idea, and I went to Kolar, and soon after started getting involved in that work. I think Ramaya asked me to be part of that process, because theatre is and he was running a really fantastic space set amongst rocky terrain and boulders, and you have an amphitheatre carved out of the rocks in some sense, and working on very pertinent questions about futurity, about what does one do with caste in the context of children and pedagogy. And from that moment onwards, it's really been a very interesting journey with him. About the question, maybe to give a little bit of an anecdote, like in 2014, when Ramaya himself was also struggling with what does a performer and what does a playwright do in a particular kind of ideological context where there's a lot of erasure. So what was happening is that despite the fantastic work that he's done, he's written 60 plays, and you at that point you were a little bit surprised, saying that I didn't know that a thing like this exists, or a person like that exists. Along with the erasure, there's also the crisis of a kind of creative being who's functioning within a kind of framework in which social transformation needs to happen, but there's also a question of the story, creativity and those kind of things. And that context leads us back really to the moment in which the DSS really began, which was a movement which was founded on that idea of like literature and aesthetics kind of existing simultaneously. In 2014, when things got really bad in Kolar, where there was not much support, and Ramaya was really kind of upset. There was just me, him, and another girl from the local village on the hill. And at some point, there was this theatre group who called him saying one of our shows is cancelled, and It's a play on King Lear. And he came, so he said, why not? But the thing is that you won't get a performance space because there are the rocks, and if you can perform in the rocks and get your own audience.
Is this because of dance?
In many ways, yes. But what he was at that moment when this theatre troupe kind of arrived, and he really challenged them to break down the boundaries of what theatre means, in a kind of conventional sense. Without props, without the kind of fourth wall, in a sense, existing. So, I mean, that moment was very interesting for me because he talked about the history of which Lakshman will talk about a little bit more, which is, Dronacharya, the Dronacharya school of pedagogy, in a sense, which is very present in theatre training in Karnataka, and how one needs to really transcend the boundaries within that, and where does one search for a possibility in terms of Dalit aesthetics.
Lakshman, I think, want to join us.
Yeah, I will just elaborate. Yeah. I won't talk about the play we did, but I will talk about a few things which maybe that might trigger some question about the play also. I mean, I wanted to say many things which Jyoti also covered in some sense. So then when you ask questions, we talk about it. But I talk about some fundamental things in theatre, which is we all agree that theatre, the fundamental element that we need for theatre is body. Very much body. We need body and all that. So I understand that everybody talks about body, and we talk about ideal body, and we talk about ideal voice. And I'll tell you this story. When this thought of body came to me very strongly, I was in Gudibande in Kolar. So there was this movement happening, and there was a celebration of Dalit activist called Yellodu Anjanappa. In that event, I met this person who was very tall and big and black. He was very beautiful. He was looking so beautiful. And I saw him in front of everybody. He was like this. That image hurt me. I was very sad to see that. I was very sad to see that body, such a expressive body being like that in front of somebody. That I started to question that. Then that question is always there for me if I see a Dalit body on stage. I get very angry when Dalit body is very submissive on stage. And that goes to the question of gesture. When we talk about Abhinaya Darpana or Natya Shastra, Abhinaya Darpana, the question of gesture is so evident. They have a particular mudra for Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, and they don't have a gesture for untouchable. And even if they have a gesture for untouchable, it's the gesture of humiliation that they have. Then how, if the theatre is about gesture, about body, how do I present this body on stage? How do I? It's a question. And wherever you go study theatre, they talk about body and they talk about ideal body. And this, if you see a Dalit body, there is a constant accumulation of humiliation. It's an archive. How to get rid of it? Kumaran was saying, right? It is in our blood. It is in our blood. How to get that thing out of our system? How to do that? That was my challenge. That was my question. That was how should I do that? But I have seen those bodies being expressed fully in their cultural spaces. Not on modern theatre. In their cultural space, they're fully expressive.
Outside the theatre.
Yeah, which is outside, which is on street, which somebody is playing the parade. And whenever I see modern theatre narrative on Dalits, I see people see it as a problem. Their life is not a problem, not just a problem. I don't want my whole identity or life to be seen as just a problem. Yeah, we have a crisis. That's your problem too. Yeah, right. That's your problem too. Why are you looking at me like I'm a problem? this is the question. Like this is where I started my theatre practice. I arrived at it. I was also believing in many other things because I was trained in particular theatre school. I was studying Adishakti, I was studying poetics, I was studying Shakespeare, I was studying Brecht, Beckett, many other people. And Grotowski, Stanislavski, many people who are like they are not addressing my question. Yeah.
Thanks for
Yeah, thanks for opening up that question of the Dalit life as a problem. Gopal Guru says that Dalits are never seen as a mind. So that's something which you are like through your performance. I think you would want to also challenge. Because you kind of mentioned, both of you in fact mentioned about the practice which you are doing. It's one side to do. It is to do with breaking away from the conventional practices, and the other side you have to create something new something which is constructive in that sense, like something which it's not just you're not only challenging which is there, but then at the same time you're doing that, but something to recreate or it's not just a deconstruction. It's something evolving or something which is generative, which if I could say that. So in that sense, if you as performers, as practitioners, what are the techniques which you bring into your practice, your practice of theatre? The techniques which you can both at once challenge, at the same time you kind of create something new. Because we started off with this Magizhchi perspective, where there is a movement from this pain and humiliation towards a life which is always in the process of becoming. So how do you actually bring in certain techniques, because it's as practitioners, so which we would like to listen from?
Else telling me that my culture is bad or it's not worthy seeing or listening to, that is kind of discrimination. What the other thing, the worst case is, it makes you feel that you yourself start to think that your culture is worse and cheap and it's not worth listening to. That is the worst thing that can ever happen to one. But the moment, I think the reading Ambedkar was the biggest break for me as a cultural pedagogue. Ambedkar is a cultural pedagogue for me. He is if you read Ambedkar, you realize, you start to realize there's so much to look at, and then we start to accept our own community differently. We start to embrace. Then we see the life there. See, I would never thought the play that we use, Pare and Urme, could be used like this. I did theatre for last 12 years. We did this play last 3-4 months. It took time for us to but these instruments were there when I was growing. These instruments were there when I was studying theatre also. Take these things as a pride and as a wisdom. But the question how to challenge is it's there already. My presence, just the presence of that instrument itself will become a provocation. It's not that I no need to do anything. That's an interesting this thing for me. And before, I said before, the presenting the Dalit body, the marginalized body on stage, how to present, how to amplify that presence. There are some techniques, there are some techniques which are theatrical, body oriented only. Those things are there in Dalit theatre practices also. Even in, for example, see, if we think of oral epics in Karnataka as a Dalit performance practice, the vocals that they use, it's so theatrical. It's very theatrical, but we don't consider it as theatrical because we have not read it. It's not part of our pedagogy.
Yeah. you
Yeah,
can also
just
there is
add to-
2-3 forms,
Yeah,
creative forms
absolutely.
in practice by Dalit communities.
Yeah, so just adding to what Lakshman is saying about the body, there is something interesting that was happening with the play, which is also the choice of the text. And that opens up a whole range of questions because it's a text written by K.B. Siddhaya, who's one of the founders of the Dalit movement. And it's a very unusual text that one could expect from someone who grew up in a highly politicized environment. You know, one of his other songs is called Vandu Dahana the Kathe, which is really kind of political, but you can see that K.B. Siddhaya was also constantly sensitive to these kind of questions, cultural memory, and invokes that and puts that also into a song of resistance. So there was something interesting happening in my estimation about the period from the 85 onwards, from 1985, when I think a lot of the founders of the Dalit movement who had earlier written songs and were now turning to different forms of poetics and literature and text. And I think that in some ways, at least some of them went back to forms of orality. And within that, so for example, Devnur Mahadeva's Kusum Bale is a very prominent text in Karnataka, and that really starts with an invocation of this untouchable saint Male Mahadeshwara, which is actually an oral epic sung over 3 nights, and in some ways tries to work with the form of oral epic storytelling. Similarly, K.B. Siddhaya also takes this journey. Even someone like Dr. Sidlingaya works, his PhD thesis is on Grama Devtegalu, which is village gods. Koteganalli Ramaya starts working with the tradition that Gogu Shamala is very intimately connected and to, which is the Jambava Purana, for example. And I think this journey inwards shouldn't be seen as a certain kind of contradiction. It is also a way to reformulate what Lakshman was saying, right?
So there is an outer form and there's something internally, there's a traveling between. I have a very...
I'll just
yes,
add
no,
one thing.
no, because-
When I say body, it's just not the limbs and all that. Like when I say body,
Yeah,
it's the
I was-
color,
I was coming
it's
to
the
that.
sound, it's the text that I use, it's the gesture I use. It's the audience I play with, the space I play with. It's all like it's becoming one body. That is the body, like the holistic body, not like body which is limited to just limbs and all these things. Yeah.
So just building on that, Lakshman, I think you put it very nicely. Like Jyoti Nisha's concept of Bahujan spectrum, which is actually coming from a oppositional case, and since you're thinking and conceptualizing an anti-caste body, I was thinking because when we read your play, you proposed this idea, rather, from Siddhaya Nodi. Would both of you want to talk about that and what it means to your practice of theatre?
Nodi is a word in Kannada which is very difficult to translate in English. The closest estimation would be speech, voice, sound, word. And that really kind of talks about a philosophy of articulation, which I think has been present in Karnataka for a millennia now. It's also a word that's used very strongly within the Vachna movement, or the Lingayat movement from the 12th century onwards. But it really opens up the idea of text to something that is not merely meaning, but is something that's felt, something that's imagined, something that's received, and that's something that has agency of its own. So in many ways, and it is also something that challenges the idea of orality, because it's not just the spoken word, Nudi is also the text. And I think when we were working on Daklakatha Devi Kavya, what was really fascinating and most engaging for me is to understand how someone like K.B. Siddhaya has kind of reached back into an oral tradition. But he's not stuck with it. What he's done is that he's really reshaping it and revoicing it. And then when it comes back to the performance stage, the actors' body, their own practices of articulation kind of open up the text in very interesting ways. So the idea of Nudi is never an opposition between oral and the literal, and that I think a lot of Dalit aesthetics has been.
Would you want to comment on that?
Yeah.
Yeah. See what like the memory things they talked about, and he got that text from epics, oral epics, and when we were doing the process, when we were in this process of creating the Kalkata Devi Kavya, many actors start to talk about their memories of the rituals, songs. The songs those are used in the play, they're from them. Like Santosh said some song, and Bindu also came up with some songs, and then some of the rituals that I saw as a kid in my village. Like, and the interesting thing, they were forgetting, like it's okay to like forgetting all the things, and they started to feel little bit confident about that, feel good about it, that they're sharing that song. Like in the beginning, Santosh said like, oh, like this song, are we going to use this song? Like that. Now, like in the play, that song is so celebrated. Like oh, like it's like this as something. Yeah.
Manju will ask the final question.
Thanks for bringing in many elements. One of the concept of Nodi is very exciting. As you rightly pointed out, it's like path beyond orality or something which is text, which is also very important to Dalit emancipation in a way that how writing itself was not accessible, and then how it was later a struggle, and then we are just connecting all these things through paths like orality, writing, and performance through the theater practice. So maybe to the last question, which is also the larger question, which kind of connects all the discussions which we are having all these days, is it's about the anti-caste intervention of this performance, of this practice, which you want to bring into this theater. So what are the elements or the gestures, and because you have already mentioned the idea of body, theater, and body. So something to elaborate on that, one could think of what are the anti-caste performative tactics, or what are the anti-caste interventions which you are doing through this performance. Both of you can, maybe both from the research aspect and also from the performance aspect, like what is something which you're bringing distinct.
And then we Ambedkarite theatre.
Yeah, because we actually heard from Ambedkarite aesthetics in cinema, so maybe one could also listen from Canterbury and Ambedkarite aesthetics in theatre.
Yes, then of course. The thing is that when I say like gesture, the play starts with the Kalkata Devi Kavya starts with a Tamate performer coming on stage saying, "I want to smile a little better." Okay, and he goes back, and he comes back again, and he says, and he plays, and he says, "I want to dance better." He's taking that space. He's taking that power. The Tamte performer taking that power for me. For me, it's important as a performer also. For me, it's important. I work with actors very individually. It's a very personal. I have a personal connection with them, and for me, it's important the guy who is doing that role, doing that. Bharat doing that. I think that's where I start, because Ambedkarite politics, it's about taking space and taking the dignity. You know, like when the Tamte performer is treated as somebody like that in a village, he deserves the space. It's not that somebody has to give him, he deserves that. I think my aesthetics and gestures and body starts from there. Yeah.
Add to that, since I mean, this opening up of the idea of performance as opposed to theatre, you know, with all of this history and legacy of the body that has existed before space is allowed, even in the theatre space, really opens up the possibility of performance to be many things, I think, within the Dalit context, and that's really where the idea of, you know, looking towards the future as to what kinds of directions performance might take. We've seen, you know, someone like Ramaya who uses performance as a sort of pedagogy for children, you know, in moments in which the school curricula is kind of foreclosed, to bring in issues of caste or dignity, or things that Lakshman talked about in terms of the body. Theatre then becomes that space, you know, it's extracurricular, it's not supervised, that it's subversive in that sense. But at the same time, you know, right now he's working on a play which he thinks is very important. It's a question of atrocities, it's a question of the problem in some ways, that also needs to be talked about. And his recent play has gone to 150 villages and talks about atrocities in a very forthright way. So I think journeys into cultural memory, reshaping what does it mean to have a voice, body, sound, imagination. So the possibilities for theatre as a kind of political and subversive and imaginative tool are really great.
So, thanks for this very enlightening engagement. I think we want to have opened this up with everyone. I'm sure there are a lot of questions and engagement, and also it's an opportunity to have everybody in the panel now. I call Jyoti also to join us and see as one large panel, the last panel on Refounding Dalit aesthetics. We would like all of them to be opened up for discussions and questions. So in the first session we had on cinema with a pre-release of her trailer, and we had two performance artists, one a researcher, other one a very active practitioner who engaged with us on performance in films and largely on refounding Dalit aesthetics with the question of Magizhchi perspective. So let me now open up the stage for.
Thank you so much for the panel. I have a question about the film practice of our two theatre practitioners, because this is also you know, something you have been engaging with. So again, you know, crossing bridges in a way. So can you say a few words about that?
Since the mic is here, may I ask my question as well, and you can do it all in one go. I know, Jyoti, that it took you a while to get the cut right so that you were happy, and I was wondering whether you could elaborate a little bit on when it felt ready. Because of course the film is done, isn't it? You know, you're not going to take it off the show just you feel comfortable talking about, and about the play. I mean, the play is a constant form of becoming, but by the time you stage it the first time, it must also feel right. So was there also some agonizing over what, you know, whether certain things need to be a certain way to feel right for it to be staged for the first time?
So the film, I see the why we got into film, because that's another, like as she was mentioning, that is there in popular culture a lot, that more than theatre. So like when we were working, like actually during pandemic, we were working on Ramaya's writings on pedagogy. He was particularly writing on this guy called Raja, who is a special person. Like he doesn't go to school, but he knows all the stones and the places and everything on the hill, you know. But he cannot like really understand the pedagogy that's happening in the school. But Ramaya started to have an engagement with this person, and Mohit had shot that in 2014. When I saw the footage, I felt like, come on, this was also my case. Like this is like very I could relate to it. Then the writing we were reading, Ramaya is written on Shaleglu Hegre, which means how school should be. So that's we thought like we can do this interdisciplinary thing. You know, we have the text and we have the film and we have Ramaya who can engage with teachers and the students also, and that I can also turn that into a performance. Like we were thinking, like we were very ambitious, and we started to do that. I mean, that's our engagement with the film. We want to make films, but that's she was also mentioning yesterday. It's a very expensive medium. So like for now, theater works for us. So yeah.
Judith, was that a question for me? No, no. It was for them.
No, it was for,
Yeah, okay.
Nicole's.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question, Nicole. I mean, it is agonizing. Because I've been working on the film for a couple of years, and like I said before also, I didn't feel that I was myself educated enough, about the cause or the entire anti-caste movement, politics, and anybody who's, all the people who've worked and written, contributed to the movement in some way. So first, I shot the film. I had some understanding of like what I was dealing with, because I come from the community and there is a history of anti-caste movement in the family as well, but I still did not feel confident enough that I can take it out to public. So I did my master's, that's why, also. And actually, when you work on something, especially where you are also learning, and then what you learn, you have to also kind of convey in the most easiest form possible. It's quite tough, I think so. And the moment and the journey of being there, you just feel like, I also felt like I finished one cut of the film, did the DI, did the sound design, so spent money on it actually, and I was not happy with the film. Like, I was not happy, and I'm not kidding you, I have had sleepless nights. I have not been able to sleep for months properly because I have been constantly trying to crack a structure in my head. That how do I want to tell this story? What is it exactly? So and also a part of the journey of making this film is also that a lot of people did not understand what I was saying. Because I started working on the film in 2016. So the discourse was there, but it was not so much there. Obviously, these filmmakers, Ranjit and Nagaraj, these people had done Neeraj. These people had worked on it, but it was very difficult to collaborate with technicians who could get that politics. So I come from a film school where, of course, there are people from the community as well, in our courses, there are like 13 students in one batch. So it's a very small batch. So within which you have reserve seats are only 1, 2. So you barely come across people. You have people from the community, but are they aware of the politics that you are dealing with? So it became a challenge. Like, I had to meet so many people, the editors, the sound designers, like what sound do I want, what kind of editing I want, why do I want this shot after this shot so that makes the scene. It was very difficult. So that was also very challenging. I think it's perhaps also because you are telling a story that's not being told in the way that you want to tell it. So in that sense also, for me personally, it was for me to realize that, okay, like this is part of telling the story. This whole journey is that, and it is quite agonizing, but I think I've got it now. So we'll see the film soon. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rashmi, and I'm going to frame this question as simply as I can. It's for everyone. Every time we have an opinion, we also have an opposing opinion to it. And we cannot say whether this is right or that is. When is that point that you get to know that this is my opinion and this is the right opinion and this is the opinion or the story that I want to work on? And as I know you all mentioned at one point that that's a journey that we're all setting onto and we're educating ourselves. But there's also this point as makers and as practitioners, as storytellers, that this is an opinion, but there are such popular opinions going around, and how do you not sort of get carried away with it. So it's what is this point or that seed when you decide this is the point that I want to make? Yeah.
This is to everyone.
Feeling driven. So I approach my work very intuitively, first of all, like how is it making me feel? If it makes me feel powerful, if it makes me feel sick, if it makes me if it gives me pleasure, if it gives me empowerment. So first of all, like I delve into, that's my process, but particularly is how do you intuitively engage with something, because I think the subconscious mind knows much more than the conscious mind. And then the part of research comes into place. Like for example, for me it was gaze, and I did not like the way the popular culture was looking. And there's the way of their ways of looking, and then I found all the theorization and whatever, anybody who's perhaps even an interview or research or film or something like that. So yeah, it's, I think first to intuitively figure out what you want, I think, and then the consumption of so much knowledge to kind of figure out that, because I mean, it's especially for academia, I think so, you know, it is that you have to find that articulation, because there's a thesis, there's an antithesis, and there has to be a synthesis. So I think for me it works like that. Yeah, I think that's my answer.
Yeah, I think for me also it's a very intuitive process. Even creating something, we arrive at it. In theatre, it's much more fluid. Like we constantly, even when we perform here, when we performed in Indian Room, it was different. We changed some things. But like again, like of course, I have my readings and everything, but in the process, I believe in intuition, and I go with that. And because of the so much of practice also, like you have been practicing, and like sometimes I'll try to, I mean, I'm sure about my choice. Whatever the consequences is, I will face that, but I will be sure about my choices. Yeah.
Just to expand this, to put a very basic way, is it just politics? If you want to take a question and ask, is your practice just politics? How would you respond?
Yes, but just not that. Yeah, because I have, see, politics is very personal also, no? So politics is very personal. So I start with myself and the other things. So it's personal and political at the same time for me. And like I see, like I have all the respect for slogans, like because I believe in that. At the same time, I know like what I want to do as an artist, because I don't want to be reduced into something that to give an identity. So I'll be very conscious about that. Yeah.
I think that's a great question. It's something that we probably all struggle with. But theatre is a very different medium. If you booked a show, you have to have the thing ready. But I think with other things like writing, and Jyoti also has talked about this, giving it time sometimes always helps. And I think time shaped things. The film we saw just before this, it was that time that demanded that and kind of aligned. So I think that's also a process that one realizes that it's all right to leave something unfinished at a certain point. It will come back if it's important at the right time.
Do you want to have a final say?
Can I add a little bit? So I also think very, like from the making of this film and even writing, I think a story has its own journey. You can't force it also. Like you might be wanting it that it should go in this way, or you'd want your character to work in a certain way. But no, once it's on paper, they are going to dictate the terms, the words are going to dictate the terms, you know, how do you want to take it? So yeah.
Thanks, Rashmi, for this question.
It's very funny.
You correct me if I'm wrong. I have impression that Dalit literature started very earlier, and this was a huge number of production and have a really a great place now in Indian literature. But I have impression theatre and cinema started very late. Dalit theatre or Dalit cinema. And I have impression is because artists, we think we are very open and stage is very open, we don't need to do any effort. And also, it's not only matter of story, because you point out very rightly, it's also matter of body, props, aesthetics, the way we do the performance. Because all this is started by something, and we all think this is the right thing. My question is, when there is value fixed by dominating culture, this is the right aesthetic, this is the right way to do theatre, and suddenly the Dalit movement come and started to say, no, there are some other values, which is not bad things. And I have impression that the Dalit movement is not reduced to one particular thing. It will also, for me, as a movement to the emancipation of the society itself. Because when non-Dalit people are starting to think about, they also realize we are all full of dominating structure in our head, and we have to question it. I have impressions, I hope it won't be reduced to particular community, and it's also the starting point of the emancipation of all of us, all the society. And I just wanted to hear if theatre is, if I'm right when I'm saying these issues can very late in theatre and cinema. We have Paranjit, but it's only one Paranjit, and so how many hours they wait? They are waiting and they didn't get this place to tell the story. So that very intriguing for me. Why theatre and cinema they started so late? This work.
This is to Lakshman and Mohit.
So, like Dalit theatre, if we say, even now we are not calling Dalit theatre. But I feel whenever we say folk theatre, mostly it's Dalit theatre, but we are not giving the credits. You know, we generalize folk literature because we don't want to give the credits, and we can dismiss it easily when you say folk and all that. I think Dalit theatre I feel it's been there even before the literature, because even the oral tradition, they're performers. They don't say, they sing. For example, we have Vante Swami Kavya, oral epic in Karnataka. We have Malay Madhapan Kavya. We have many other poetry recitation. They're performers. They say stories, but not in the way that we think is theatrical. You know, the language is different. And also, like, I know, like, it is not it for everybody, but I feel like, see, now you are doing theatre for so long, many people, like if you think like other people, non-Dalits, and you're not so interested in Dalits' stories and design aesthetics. And now, like, it has its harvest, and now you want to climb everything. That is the dangerous space. I think we have to, like, I had this comment on Jai Bhim. You know, like the slogan to become that powerful, many Dalit people have worked so hard, and suddenly you're coming and you're taking the harvest. Like, you're capitalizing it. Like, that shouldn't happen in theatre also. Where do we stand there? That is very important for me. Yeah, I don't know whether I answered your question.
I think this would go, I mean, it can be expanded, but just to open this up, can there be a Dalit cinema just connected?
It's already there, right? Yeah. So, yeah. I actually, I don't know. Should we call it Dalit cinema? Should we call it marginalized cinema? Should we call it Bahujan cinema? Should we call it what exactly? I don't know. But I think the question is to occupy space. The question is to tell your stories from your own milieu and culture. The question is also to have practitioners and which are involved in the making of the film, and they should be involved. It shouldn't be just like directed by some person. I think increasingly we should try, if it is possible, to have the crew also there. So then it's because it's just not cinema. You have to build an entire industry. I'd like to have that. You know, I would like to have the autonomy to produce the work like upper-caste filmmakers get that access. You know, it kind of becomes that. I don't like this term. I mean, to be tagged into a category, perhaps. But I think from the perspective of aesthetics and storytelling, yes, absolutely. I think an entire industry, we should be part of the entire industry, and we should occupy space completely.
wanted to extend from what Lakshman was saying about the idea of the folk. It's also very easy to dismiss the politics of folk without understanding, the kind of practices of subversion, interpolation, turning things upside down, and how that language really, for a long time, was a language of protest. Is it sufficient? Obviously not in this time, but was it important at a certain time, and what does it lend to performance now? For example, in the Manteswami Kavya, when Manteswami encounters Baswana, we've talked about this, that just for simple sound signification, a certain kind of rejection or hierarchy is made in that performance. And that, in the context that it comes from, it's a big thing. So to be able to recognize that subtlety, and I think K.B. Sidhaya's poetry also does that in some ways, right?
Just to add to that, to Baswana, he comes from Lingayat tradition, and he's a master in Kalyanam, in that epic. But Manteswami, who is known for his impurity and all that, he goes and addresses him in a very arrogant manner. Hey, Baswana, something like that, He's not like so submissive. Oh, Swami, like not like that. The tone is, that is theatrical for me. The attitude of his voice. Attitude was, hey, Baswana, like that, as if he's talking to the power. Baswana is the power there. Like he's addressing the power in this tone, in that oral epic. It's very important event for me. That should be addressed, I also feel.
Thanks. There's a question from... Can you just introduce yourself?
Yes. So my question is a very big question. I think you understand my question. See, when we come to the Dalit perspective, there is always a two-side perspective. One is what we see Dalit as a victim, and other perspective is the one Dalit as a survivor or a rebellion. These are two main perspectives of Dalit. So the maybe a Dalit writer or a Dalit artist, he normally comes up as a rebellion. Like Ranjit, what you say, he comes up with happiness and what the happiness and what the important things, what the beautiful things in his life of a Dalit. He comes up with this. But other side, there are also perspectives that showcasing Dalit as a victim. So these are two coins, two faces of the same coin. So when we choose as an art, so which part of the Dalit which will be of first preference? If we see a victim or if we see a survivor. Another thing. These are two parallel movements where the mainstream has another kind of art, they have the literature, they have their own kind of discourse, they have their own kind of music. Where Dalit, they have their own kind of music, therefore they have it. It's two parallel even. Maybe they excluded them or they excluded them. They also excluded them. They are not part of the Varna system. So they have their own style. So when you bring this Dalit art form into the so-called new modern art form, so, what do you feel of which you adapt? Maybe yesterday, last time when you were speaking with, there is a conversation with V.M. Krishna. So, he was even so felt, and he said that he felt even uneasy to use the term Malam or P because I cannot sing it in the stage. So, he was feeling like that. So, when you bring this Dalit art form into the modern or the contemporary art form, what difficulty do you feel? And third is that, how is the acceptance with the main thing?
Something to also think on your aesthetics of, like, since he was asking about victim or the survivor. I mean, just to come out of this, like, or to think in a different way. That is, how do you want to how do you want to see your art or your like all of you can answer, which is capable of affecting the other. I mean, the other can be anybody. Like it need not be the one from the community. It's the other can be dominant. It's an art which can actually touch the other. I mean, because that's something which I would want you to reflect on. Maybe you can come back to it last.
Okay. Take your time. You have a lot of time.
Okay, I think it's the way It's the way of seeing, like how are we seeing? And I'm not much interested in the stories of victim. I personally would like to tell stories of assertion, and and it's just not, why do we need to sort of also adhere to or fit into this mold of that victim and survivor? It could be anything, right? Like, imagination is wild, and you can, like, perhaps, did you see Wakanda Forever? The Black Panther. So, something like that. If I get an opportunity to make a film like that, I'd like to do that, So, where you are completely like overhauling everything, because they are ahead in technology. They are sort of culturally much more richer, and they are spread all over the globe. So for me personally, it will be that. And I think increasingly, very intentionally, I would want to tell stories which are positive, which have a more positive impact. Because the stories of, this agony, pain, and victims is too much. The dominant perspective, as a popular perspective, has already done it. And I think it is also to kind of supply that kind of visual knowledge or academic knowledge, so that when you have that material, because again, it's a question of funding, whose funding creates scientific questions. So unless we don't have, again, all of that is also so much dependent on funding. So if we have the resources, I think everybody would want to tell like a positive story, most of it. But I speak for myself, I would like, for me, like, it'll be something like Black Panther, I dream of, like something like that I would like to do, which goes across the globe, Yeah, thank you.
For me, this is from I learned from Gogu Shamala's work. So this victim and hero, or as a this thing. Of course, I don't want to say victim this thing, because I have seen enough, and I don't want other people to see that aspect much. And when it comes to, like, when you do that assertion, like, I will say this story. Of course, we have to be. I have faced many things. So it's an interesting thing. So this left and right politics very strong, no, in India. Everybody has to be left or right. And in Karnataka also it's like that. This is like before this film, okay, Nachitram Nagarigirado also. I went to a theatre school, and they were called to hire a teacher. It's a government funded theatre institute. And they asked me, so are you left idea, belong to left ideology or right? I'm Ambedkarite, I said, literally same thing. And they didn't take me. So, and I was not like, I was sure that they will not take me, because I will use the annihilation of caste as my pedagogy. So that we have to be ready to face these things, and that is fine. I have to take that risk, I feel, as a practitioner. Yeah.
Mohit as a researcher.
I wanted to speak personally, but I was just reflecting back on the first time when you read that important line in the play, the way it ends, that untouchability is not self-aggrandizement or adoration or egotism, but it's an insight. And there was a moment in which that it really worked, that line, and the group is quite diverse. There are people who come from Dalit backgrounds, there are people who don't, as in many theatre groups. And I think there was a moment in which everyone kind of agreed with that. So whether it is a question of learning from Jyotiba Phule, Dr. Ambedkar, or people closer to us, I think that that's something very important to recognize. That there's an insight, there's a futurity, and there's a vision. And that is something that I think the possibility of presenting this work through aesthetics, through intellectuality, has the possibility to do.
Since all of you spoke about personal thing, are there any inspirations for you, just to build on, within film, within theatre, any inspirations within the community for you?
I want to just read something to you, perhaps, and then I'll answer your question.
Sure.
So, psychoanalyst Clarissa Pinkola, she's written this book, The Hero with 1,000 Faces. She's also written this book called The Women Who Run with the Wolves. She says, if courage and bravery are the muscles of the spiritual drive that help a person to become whole, then stories are the bones. Together, they move the episodes of the life myth forward. Why stories? Because the soul's way of communicating is to teach. And its language is symbols and themes, all of which have been found since the beginning of time in stories. The soul needs stories. The radiant center we call the soul is the enormous aspect of the psyche which is invisible, but which can be palpably felt. There is a hearing capacity in the psyche. So what I want to say is this, that again, also, reinstating the point that the stories of victimization have been overtold so much that, and again, like stories are also so cathartic, they can really shift your perspective, because some films have done that for me. So I really think that I would like to tell stories which are more affirmative, which are more empowering and powerful. And even if I have a choice, because again, like the question is about funding, I would like to, because mostly I negotiate, like, no, I don't want to do this, I want to do that. So, it's to tell more empowering stories. And to answer your questions, Baba Sahib, on any day, because he's shaped my life. The film has shaped me. Yes, it's shaped the
scene.
Yeah.
From the craft.
Yeah. From the craft. First of all, I think because we've been talking about gaze and aesthetics and all of that, and then I'll get into the craft, because because craft can be learned, but what you want to tell, that there is a whole journey behind that. There is a whole and a journey for that matter. I like Agnes Varda's film work and Tridmana's work, and I mean mostly women filmmakers actually, and of course Ranjit and all the people, and Leela Santosh, I forgot, she's an indigenous woman from Kerala, and she's made this film which I can't pronounce, but she's made a fantastic film which is on YouTube and is produced by Neelam Productions as well. Krzysztof Kieslowski and Abbas Kiarostami.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're just taking more names.
Of course, Baba Saheb Ambedkar is my cultural pedagogue, and I can't think of any in theatre. I mean, Ramaya, Kotakanadi Ramaya, and my mother, maybe. Yes.
I think the entire legacy of anti-caste struggle, starting from Jyotiba Phule, who really talked about education as being a transformative tool, Baba Saheb Ambedkar, and I think many people that you encounter in everyday life who are resilient, who are imaginative, who are constantly creating despite all kinds of struggles and odds.
So on that positive note, okay, one last question, and they're waiting to toll the bell. Yeah.
Department of Economics, Pondicherry University. So thanks for this conversation, and I'm sorry that I did not watch your play. I had other things to that diverted me. But coming to this question, because I see myself as a researcher and anti-caste researcher. The problem that Dalits face is that more than what we think of ourselves, the problem is what others think of us. So we are even when it is writing a research or as a creative artist, you are kind of swimming against the tide where they have already said don't know what we are and how we should behave and so on, and that is something that you are trying to question through your art. And the way you defined the body, beautiful body being very submissive and which hurt you. Given this point, what we, whereas for all of the creative artists or for all other writers, whatever they write is kind of something that doesn't have anything to do with their identity and the politics of it. Whereas when an art comes from the bottom, or when an art comes from a Dalit or a critic of established casteist tendencies, it's no, we are playing with a kind of a stagnated mind, no, which defines not self but us, right? Right? So how do you kind of tackle it, and how do you keep moving? Thank you.
Going against the tide is the.
Yeah. So I'll try to say that very shortly. Maybe I'll try to, what I'm trying to do is dismiss that given identities to me, constantly given. I try to dismiss and I try to set my games. You have set games so far, I'll set my games. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Very nice answer. Thanks for that. So yeah, on that note, we will conclude this session. I would like to thank Jyoti, Lakshman, and Mohit for this very fascinating and intellectually stimulating discussion. And I would also like to thank all of you for your questions and your participation. So yeah, I think Judith and Nicole would like to conclude the session. So yeah, a big round of applause for all of them. Thank you.
So it's a difficult task to conclude, to wrap everything up and to conclude, this wonderful 5-day festival. I have felt that it had, opened so many routes and so many interactions and discussions, and that a lot has been happening on stage, obviously, but so much more, or so, just as much, has been happening also behind the stage and just in between the acts. So all those connections that have been happening, in fact, over the past few years, few months, several weeks, from Bangalore, I have to say that the connection with Ramaya, also the connection with Kolar, Bangalore, that Mohit was mentioning, just a few minutes ago. This is also the place where CADALFEST at Bangalore, happened. And the fact that Indian Nostrum as well, Jangama Collective also played at Indian Nostrum, after having played here, and all those different connections that have been made. People who had read about, writers, read about thinkers, who finally got the chance, to meet in person and to talk in person and to make contact and establish new projects as well together with potentially people that, they hadn't even dreamt they would make contact with. So this has been, very much part of not the plan, because, nothing in that respect can be planned in advance, but it was a proposition. We had that kind of idea, in our heads, that we would like to offer that kind of space where people can actually meet and listen to each other and listen to themselves as well. There was the journey inward that was mentioned. So there was so many journeys, but that dual journey that happened, in fact, the journey outward and the journey inward. And this constant self-reflection and self-doubt and interrogations that come up, within oneself and also in the conversation. And of course, in the exchange, I change. And so it's all, CADALFEST at Adishakti was very much about this. And every single person among you has made it happen. So we are extremely, extremely grateful. And you want to, yes, I'm sure you have also a few more words as well that you want to share. You can feel some of the emotions, so it's time for me to, give you the mic.
You didn't want to though, did you? I could tell. Oh yeah, it's been a really intense 5 days, huh? It's been quite a journey, and I mean, it's quite an emotional journey, and Of course, this is only one event amongst a series of events, and even this series is not over, and we're already planning follow-on things. So in many ways, it's just this is not the end, this is more like a comma, or a colon even. Yeah, so I'm really excited to see more. I just really want to thank loads of people. So I need to thank our funder, the HRC, our respective universities, who have supported us quite generously. Adishakti, our wonderful volunteers. Where are you? Hello? Volunteers? Yes, there they are. Oh. Thank you guys. Thank you. Smita, I'll see you here. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks. She really did the most. She gets to travel around India, where I usually sit in Nottingham and make these connections, which is exciting. And our wonderful local organisers, with whom this would not have been possible, right? Jenny, Palasubramaniam, wonderful. Riku, Tiani, wonderful. Thank you so much. I know Raja Ravi Varma is not here, but also thank him in absentia. He has been really instrumental as well. And someone who's never meant to be here, but she's working in Nottingham, doing so much behind the scenes, is our project officer, Bethan Evans. You will have never seen her, but it would have also not happened without her. And of course, it would not have happened without one thing. Hello, Shanthini and her wonderful team of videographers. Thank you so much. I almost forgot to mention you, because you're always so unobtrusive and doing just the job the way you meant to, blending in. So thank you so much. We can't wait to see the product so we can put it online. So that this is even more of a sort of democratizing process, so that everyone can share a little bit. So thank you so much. And thanks to all the participants. I'm going to ask you to kind of give them all an applause in a second. All our participants and our wonderful audience, our wonderful and varied audience, who also you can give yourself an applause yourself. Thank you very much. And Adishakti again. Thanks, guys.